Hello, my dear students of class 11. Welcome you all again to psychology class. In my previous class, I was taking the unit of 2 methods of inquiry in psychology. Now, there were some few topics that were left unexplained in the previous class. But today, in this class, I will be finishing the unit 2 methods of inquiry in psychology. So there are some few topics that are left to be discussed, which I will be doing so in this particular class. But at the same time, once I'm done with the explanations of this unit, I will be moving on in this particular class to unit 7, that will be emotions. So let's finish the few topics that has been left behind in the previous class from methods of inquiry in psychology. Now, just a few recap of what I have done in the previous class was on the introduction of methods of inquiry in psychology. The first topic that I went through or explained was on what is research, okay, and then the goals of scientific inquiry, the steps that are involved in conducting scientific inquiry, and then psychological data. Okay, those were the topics that we have discussed, and at the same time, there were 2 methods that I have discussed. That was on observation method and experimental method that I've already done in the previous class. So today I'll be discussing on the methods itself only, but that will come under survey research. Now there are some few methods that comes under survey research, so that will be the interview, questionnaire, and case study. So we will be looking at all these topics one by one. So before we go to the interview method, I would like to discuss on what is survey research. Survey research is a very useful tool that many of the psychologists or many researchers use in order to gather information. So survey research is done to find out the opinions of people about something, okay, about an ongoing issue or about an object. So they basically focus on the attitudes, the feelings, and facts that they have about the personal or about a particular object that they want to discuss. So survey research is basically focusing on the opinions of an individual on a particular environment, or on a particular study, or on a particular research. So it might include political issues. Some people may have different political issues about different political parties. So survey research is done in order to find out their opinions about the political parties. So that is an example of survey research. Now, the first method that I want to discuss that comes under survey research is the interview method. The interview method. Now, interview method is a useful tool that a psychologist uses in order to gather information. And interview method is also a method where someone can interact or converse with an individual in order to gather information. Now, interview method, like I have said, is basically done on a face-to-face basis. Now, interview method may include, like, if you watch a television, when you are watching television news, then you will obviously find sometimes there are talk shows. Talk shows are very informal form of interview method, but at the same time, they are done from face-to-face, face-to-face interaction. So interview method is based on the face-to-face interaction in order to gather information. Now, there are 2 types of interview method. Now, when it comes to interview method, a psychologist can employ 2 types of method. The first one is a structured or standardized method of interview. In structured or standardized method of interview, the questions are predetermined, okay? The interview does not go for a free flow, but in this structured or unstandardized method of interview, they follow a set of questions. Like, a set of questions will be prepared, and then it will be asked to the interviewee or the participant, or we call it, when it comes to an experimental psychology, a subject. So the researcher or the interviewer will ask questions to the interviewee, okay? So he will ask questions, and then the interviewee has to answer the questions in terms of yes or no, okay? They will have to provide a specific statement like yes or no, and then all those questions will be asked by the interviewer, and the interviewer cannot skip any one of the questions that has been predetermined, okay? It has been said from the first go, and then once the questions are set and once all the statements are put together, that will ask the questions, and then the subject has to respond in terms of the statements that they have been given, yes or no. So that is one of the example when it comes to structured or standardized method of interview. The second type of interview method is the unstructured or unstandardized method of interview. Now, when it comes to unstructured or unstandardized method of interview, it is very free flow. There is no restrictions for the interviewer to ask any questions or for the interviewee to answer any questions. Okay, all right. So it depends on the interviewer, whatever questions he wants to ask in order to get information. So there is no restrictions or there is no time limit as well. And for an interviewee also, he can answer those questions if he like to. So it entirely depends on the interviewee to answer the questions or not. So in that way, the interviewer can establish a firm relationship with the interviewee and he can get the information, which is also, this type of interview is also done when it comes to television settings, like an informal form of interview. So this is basically unstructured or unstandardized interview is basically an informal interview where the interviewer asks questions in order to get information. Okay, so these are the two types of interview method. Before I go to the next method of questionnaire, I want to give the advantages and disadvantages of interview method. Okay, so when it comes to interview method, the interview method has many disadvantages, but at the same time has also many advantages. So one of the advantages of interview method is that interview method is reliable, but at the same time, interview method can also be done to people who are uneducated. Okay, interview method is basically a verbal form of method where they get information, so it becomes easier for an interviewer to collect information from an uneducated person as well. Now, the disadvantages of interview method is basically, in interview method, time consumption is a lot, okay? And at the same time, there is costing of money also. So these are the disadvantages of interview method. Now, moving on to the next method that comes under survey research is the questionnaire method. Questionnaire method is basically asking questions, okay? Asking questions, and it is done not in a verbal form, but in written form, okay? So there are some types of questions that are prepared by the experimenter in order to find out or in order to collect data. So questionnaire method is done in the written form, and then under questionnaire method, there comes two types of questionnaire method that are employed in questionnaire method. The first one is the open-ended questionnaire method. In open-ended questionnaire method, okay, when it comes to open-ended questionnaire, the one who is answering the questions in the written form can answer whatever comes to his mind. Okay, he can write or he can express himself without any restrictions. If there is a question of like, what do you think about a particular political party? For an example, like, what are the opinions of yourself on the party, on the Democracy Party of, India, like for an example, Congress. So if he or the subject is asked about the opinions of the political party in open-ended questionnaire method, then the subject can answer whatever comes or what are his opinions. Okay, now he can answer according to his opinions and he can write in open-ended questions without any restrictions. But it is not like that. So when it comes to closed-ended method, in closed-ended method, the questions are set and then there are also some form of statements that the interviewer, that the subject has to answer. So for an example, when it comes to closed-ended questions, there will be three statements: likely, most likely, none. Okay, so these are the three statements that may be given in closed-ended questions in closed-ended questionnaire method. Now, a question will be given to the subject or to the interview or to the person who is doing the questionnaire method, but in closed-ended, these statements will be provided. These statements can also be changed to agree, disagree, not likely. So these are the three statements, and sometimes it comes to not likely as well. Okay, so these are the questions. Not likely. It may come to not likely also. So under questionnaire method, these are the two methods. These are the two types of methods that are employed: open-ended questionnaire method and closed-ended questionnaire method. Now, the last topic that comes under the survey research is the case study. Now, a case study is being implemented by various people, by various individuals or psychologists in order to study about human behavior, in order to collect information about a particular subject. So, case study is a very, very intensive and extensive study of a subject in order to collect information. Now, case study is being employed at many levels and at many different aspects. So, case study is basically a very, very long or long period of study where it involves duration of time that will be very long, and at the same time there is also an investment of money that needs to be put in order to do a study on the subject. Now, when it comes to case study, they do an extensive study of a behavior or of a particular subject, or on a particular set of situations. Now, for an example, if a psychology wants to study about the human development, when it comes to human development, the idea itself of birth. Okay, now he has to select a subject, and he has to look, or he has to study since birth, and it might involve the study on human development from age 0 to age 12. So he will have to study from birth till the childhood level. So it becomes a very, very extensive study, because it will take a very long years in order to study the human development. So case study is one of the method that is used in order to study this. Now, human development. When it comes to human development, the researcher will be studying about the birth, the behavior, the emotional changes, and then at what time they are able to speak. The language will come around, and then the verbal expressions, facial expressions that will come in the study of human development. So whenever a researcher is doing a case study on human development, he will be writing it down. He will be collecting the information by employing different methods. The different methods can be employed in terms of, sometimes the researcher can employ the experimental method, where he can control the situations, manipulate the situations, and then he can find out what are the responses when it comes to a control settings. At the same time, the researcher can observe. So that will come under observation. He can observe, and then he can come out with a meaning to the behavior that he has observed. Okay, so different observation method. Questionnaire method can also be employed when it comes to studying human development, for an example like human development, but these different forms of methods are involved in case study. So different forms of methods involved in case study means observation method, experimental method. So these are the ones, okay, that involves in case study. Then the last topic that I want to discuss is on the ethical guidelines. And ethical guidelines is very important for any psychologist while they are doing a research. Now, this is the last topic that will come under the methods of inquiry in psychology. And once I'm done with the explanation, the class for Unit 2 will be over. So this is the last topic. Under ethical guidelines, the psychologist has to follow some few guidelines, like the first one, voluntary participation. The second will be informed consent. The third, debriefing. The fourth one is sharing the result of the study. And then the fifth one is confidential of data source. So I want to explain on the first guideline, that is voluntary participation. So when it comes to voluntary participation, the participant has to voluntarily say yes to the experiment. Okay, the researcher just cannot, force the subject or the participant to be involved in a study. Now he has to ask permission from the particular individual whether that individual wants to do the experiment, or wants to do the research, or wants to do study, okay, whether he wants to participate in the study or not. Now, the second one is informed consent. When it comes to informed consent, the researcher has to take the informed consent of the participant, and it can be done in written form, saying that whatever happens in the study or in the experiment, the the researcher will not take any, will not take any headaches for that, or will not take responsibilities for it, and then the participant has to agree to it. At the same time, there are also terms and policies that are involved when it comes to informed consent. Like if there has been an accident, then the researcher has to pay for the hospital bills. So these are the terms and policies that comes, and which can be discussed between the researcher and the participant for the study. Okay. Now, the third one is debriefing. Debriefing is basically like an instruction. An instruction is given to the participant on how to carry on with the work or how to do the experiment. Like if the subject is being experimented in a control setting, then then some few instructions will be given to be relaxed, to be relaxed and to ask questions if he has any doubts. Okay, so that will come under instructions. The fourth one is sharing the result of the study. Sharing the result of the study is very important. Now, when the research has been completed or when the study or the experiment has been completed, the researcher will have to share the result of the study with the subject. Now, he has to show that these were the outcomes of the study. And then the last one is the confidential of data source. Confidential of data source means that whatever details or the personal details that the participant has provided to the researcher, it has to remain confidential. None of the identity of the participant should be leaked, because if it is leaked, then there are some few drawbacks that can somehow it can hamper the life of the participants. So confidential, it has to be confidential. The information that the participant has given to the researcher has to remain confidential between the researcher and the participant. So that will come under confidential of data source. Now, these are the topics that we have completed on ethical guidelines, and then these are the topics that we have completed in our class of Unit 2, Methods of Inquiry in Psychology. Now, the next topic that I will be discussing on my next class will be on the Unit 7, that will be on emotion. Thank you very much.